Good morning. Thanks for the invitation. Larry Vasquez, Reclamation, the El Paso office.
Good morning, gentlemen. Michael Riley, Office Stadium.
Alfred Perot, Office of the Stadium.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. I apologize for not mentioning to start the recording. I will note that this is Wednesday, January 14th, 2026, the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of Butte Irrigation District. We will continue with the introduction of guests present online.
Certainly. Present online today, we have Delise Maciel from EBID, James Narvaez from EBID, we have Matthew Vogel, we have Dr. Phil King, and we have Sky DeVore, also AJ Carlson with EBID.
Thank you very much. I welcome you all to our regular board meeting. I appreciate your attendance and your interest in the operations of the district. I will note for the record, the invocation was given by Mr. Garai. The Pledge of Allegiance was led by Mr. Ludwig. I've had a request from Director Colquitt to make a statement. So without objection, we will hear that statement at this time. Hearing none, you have the floor, Mr. Colquitt.
I'd like to take a moment and actually give you a public shout out, Greg. You know, the other day you pulled me aside and you said, I gotta do better. And my immediate reaction was to give you the world's best excuses, which I knew I had. And they are truthfully very good excuses, but I didn't say anything because there is no such thing as an excuse. So what I did do is I said what I would do and I was more present. And I do want to tell you, you are right. I was missing a lot. But on the contrary, whenever you go, or at least I do, I go through these long periods of missing. Whenever I finally bite the bullet and hop in, it's a little daunting, but at the same time, I learned a lot. So to anyone who misses, like I do a lot, don't be afraid to hop in because you catch up at some decent speed. But thank you for that. And that was a good deal. And I needed that. Thank you.
Director Colquitt, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm fond of saying the world is run by those who show up.
Yeah.
Each of you brings valuable insight to this board. I ask you to show up and help run the world. With that, that's an excellent segue to the oath of office. Let's see. Director Garai, as an elected officer of this board and not having been elected in this round, would you mind administering the oath of office to the newly elected directors? Do you have one in front of you?
No, that's.
No, I don't.
So for the directors that were newly elected, if you would please rise. Raise your right hand and repeat after Mr. Garai.
Oath of office, State of New Mexico, County of Doniana. I, Gregory T. Davier, having been elected to the office of Director for the Elephant Butte Irrigation District.
That's too far, Mr. Garai. We have to repeat what you say. So like I state your name, just give us a
Oh, so I let everybody, okay. Would the new directors please state their names?
I, Greg Davier.
I, Casey Cross.
Do we do this all at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay.
I, Rafael Rovirosa.
PK Colquitt.
Having been elected to the office of Director for the Elephant Butte Irrigation District.
Having been elected to the office of Director for Elephant Butte Irrigation District.
Precinct number 2.
Precinct
Number 6.
number 4.
And 8 in the County of Doniana, State of New Mexico.
In the County of Doniana, State of New Mexico.
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the laws of the State of New Mexico.
And the laws of the State of New Mexico.
And faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of my office.
And faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of my office.
To the best of my knowledge and ability.
To the best of my knowledge and ability.
So help me God.
So help me God. Mr. Gray, thank you very much. I apologize for dropping that on you without any rehearsal or preparation.
Can we sign now, Greg?
Yes. So, thank you all for being willing to serve on the board of directors for Elton Butte Irrigation District, being willing to serve the members of our district, being willing to lead the management and staff of this district. And again, what an excellent segue, Director Colbert. Thank you very much.
I mean, one of the world's best excuses, but fly.
That brings us to the nomination and election of officers. We passed a resolution last year, resolution 2025-02, which outlines how we comply with section 73-10-16 of the New Mexico statutes for the election of officers. At the first, let's see how we put this. So at the first meeting in January, following the conclusion of the biennial election of directors, this board will elect a president, vice president, and secretary. A specific director may serve as president for 2 succeeding terms, after which a break in tenure from the specific position of 1 term is required. The term is 2 years until the next biennial election. I will note that I have served 2 successive terms, and I am not eligible for re-election as president of this board. Before we proceed with the nomination and election of officers, are there questions regarding the resolution we passed last year? Hearing none, I open the floor for nominations for the office, for the position of president of the Board of Directors of Elton Butte Irrigation District. Director Sloan.
I nominate Rafael Riverosa.
Second.
Thank you. I nominate Director Garai. Second. Are there additional nominations? Hearing none. Nominations are closed. At this point in time, I will ask you to write on the ballots provided for you the director you are voting for the position of president. The 2 nominees are Director Rovirosa and Director Garai. Madam Secretary, would you please collect the ballots? And if you would please read the ballots aloud.
Randy Garai voted for Rafa Rovirosa. Casey Christ voted for Rafa Rovirosa. Greg Davier voted for Rovirosa. James Sloan voted for Rovirosa. Rafael Rovirosa voted for Rafael Rovirosa. PK Colquitt voted for Rovirosa. And Director Ludwig voted for Rovirosa.
I believe that was 7 votes for Director Rovirosa.
That is correct.
Director Rovirosa is elected the president of this body. I want to note a couple of things. First, transition in leadership is a healthy thing for organizations. I support the limits and the terms for the president. I appreciate the resolution this board passed last year outlining that. I support the new president, and there is no sadness or regret from me in leaving this position. I believe it is the best thing for the organization to have these regular transfers in leadership. This gavel was a gift from my wife when I was selected to be the president of this board. And she gave it to me in the hopes that order would bring increased prosperity to the member of our district. So it is with a sense of pride and gratitude that I present this gavel to Director Rovirosa and welcome him as the president of this board and to take over this meeting. Before I go over there, I'll say that I'm very honored to be selected by all of you for this role and very humbled. And I am ready to dedicate my time and my energy to serve the members of our district and to defend their rights. I am extremely proud of our many accomplishments over the past 2 years since getting elected to the board initially. We ran and won a transformative election. And we have guided the transition from one manager to the next. And we settled a lawsuit that was going on for over a decade in Texas v. New Mexico. We changed the nature of our relationships with the OSE and with reclamation and with our own members. And I would especially like to recognize Director Davier for his many years of service in this role and for his dedication. I don't think that there's ever been a president that's dedicated so much time and that understands all of the issues at the district as much as Director Davier. And I'm very grateful for his guidance and for his mentorship. His leadership has been transformative at EBID and will be better off for decades as a result of the time that he's spent in this role. I always like to say that the 7 of us that ran for the board 2 years ago, we broke the mold and we're not revolutionaries, but what's the word when you we're the reformists? But the first reformist was actually Greg. Greg was the first reformist to get on the board. He is the first one of us to have run for this position, and he did it by himself and had nobody backing him on the board when he first got on. Very opposite of what we had. So thank you very much for your dedication and for the work you've put in and for the bravery that you had fighting for the rights of your members by yourself. So
Very well said.
You are so incredibly gracious. Thank you very much. So I'm very happy to say that Greg's mentorship of us is not over. I think this is the first time in maybe decades where the president is staying on the board and is in that everyone is getting along, is in good standing. So we're in the best place we can possibly be. Okay, with that, now we must select vice president.
Quick question.
Yes.
Is Greg eligible for other positions?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, Director Davier is eligible for all positions. So with that, I open nominations for vice president.
I nominate Greg for vice president.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I nominate Director Grant.
Second.
Okay, do I hear any other nominations? Then we have Director Garai and Director Davier as nominees for Vice President. Please cast your vote. This. Madam Secretary, would you please read the vote this evening?
Certainly. For Vice President, Randy Garai voted for Greg Davier. Casey Christ voted for Greg Davier. Rafael Rovirosa voted for Greg Davier. James Sloan voted for Randy Garai. Greg Davier voted for Randy Garai. PK Colquitt voted for Randy Garai. And Henry Ludwig voted for Greg Davier.
I believe that is 4 in favor of Greg Davier and 3 in favor of Randy Garai. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then Director Davier is the Vice President. And finally, we must elect a secretary. Do I have any nominations for secretary?
Director Randy.
Second. I nominate Director Sloan.
Second.
Do I hear any other nominations? Our candidates are Director Sloan and Director Garai. Please cast your vote. Madam Secretary, would you please collect the ballots and read out the votes?
All right, for the board position of secretary, Randy Garai voted for Randy Garai. Casey Christ voted for Randy Garai. Rafael Rovirosa voted for Randy Garai. James Sloan voted for Randy Garai. Greg Davier voted for Randy Garai. PK Colquitt voted for Randy Garai. And Henry Ludwig voted for Randy Garai. That's 7 votes for Randy.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the 2026-01 Open Meetings Act resolution.
Mr. President,
Yes, Director Dunn.
and I should have done this before the meeting. Has anyone looked to see any of the holidays of the year fall on next Wednesday? We've had some stuff that we've had to move because of the stuff I know won't fall. July 4th won't fall on it. Christmas won't fall on it.
President Raphael, this is Delise. The one holiday that does fall on a Wednesday is Veterans Day in November.
So, Mr. President, I would suggest we make a decision about whether or not we're having a meeting on Veterans Day. And I seek the input of staff about whether they normally have that day off and if we're calling them in for a meeting on a day that would normally be paid time off.
Mr. Franzler.
So that'll be off for staff. I mean, could potentially be in the meeting, but I will note that that is next fiscal year. So if you adopt the resolution for this fiscal year, you can alter the resolution going forward if need be. I assume this is just to set the meetings.
I believe that this resolution is for the calendar year, and then we would have to modify this resolution in order to we would have to pass a second resolution in order to take that day off.
Is that your understanding as well, calendar year?
Yes, you would have to amend the resolution
later in the year if you wanted to move the meeting in November.
Mr. President, I would also ask our partner agencies, if they normally would have the day off and if we're forcing them to come to a meeting in EBID. Mr. Schroeder.
How do we call it? We swap between Veterans Day and President's Day.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but don't make it seem as us. Yeah, we'll be here if we have to be here.
Director Sloan.
I move to accept the resolution 2026-01.
I second the motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Sloan and a second by Director Garai to pass resolution 2026-01.
Mr. President, I move to amend the motion to shift the I'm trying to find it, shift the date of the November meeting to whatever the following Wednesday is.
Do I hear a second?
The 18th.
Second.
I have a motion to amend the resolution by Director Davier and a second by Director Colquitt to amend the resolution, resolution 2026-01 to move the November board meeting to 1 week after.
What dates are those? Do we have
The 18th.
to the 18th?
Right.
From the 11th to the 18th.
Perfect.
Any discussion? If that discussion is closed, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it and the motion passes as amended.
I will state,
Point of order, Mr. President, we voted on the amendment.
Oh, okay, and the. Okay. His opinion of the president that the motion to amend the resolution has passed. Now I open it up for discussion on the amended resolution. Okay. Discussion open for the amended resolution. Mr. Franklin.
I think that works perfectly and that's consistent with our general meeting that we have at the year where we all come together as staff as well. Do the turkeys and hams and stuff, so I think that's perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. Any further discussion? Mr. Lutz, we opened the we passed them, or we opened the motion to approve the resolution, then we modified it. That initial motion, though modified, still opens, is that correct?
Right, so you would now vote on the resolution as amended.
Okay. Very well. With that, discussion is closed. All those in favor for approving the amended resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it and the amended resolution carries. Next item on the agenda is public input. If there's any public input, please limit it to 3 minutes per participant and with no more than 30 minutes spent. Is there any public input? Anybody online? Moving on, we have approval of the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. I have a motion to approve the agenda and a second. Second. Is that a discussable issue or do we simply vote on it? Okay, now open the floor to discussion. With that discussion is closed. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it and the agenda is adopted. Mr. Franklin.
Real quick recommendation, just to call out who is casting the votes for approving the agenda, the first and second, so we can get that in the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. I do not recall who
Motion was made by
One
Director.
and two.
Motion was made by Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Davier, to, accept the agenda. Thank you, Mr. President. Next item on the agenda is approval of board minutes. Starting with the special board meeting on December the 8th of 2025. Does anybody have any corrections to those minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Please. I have a motion from Director Colquitt to approve the minutes for the special board meeting of December 8th, 2025.
I'll second the motion.
And I have a second from Director Garai. Discussion? With that discussion closed, all those in favor of approving the board minute for the special board meeting on December 8th, 2025, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. And the opinion of the president, the ayes have it, and the minutes for the special board meeting are approved. Now we have approval of board minutes for the regularly scheduled board meeting on December the 10th, 2025. Are there any adjustments to those minutes?
I'll move to approve the board meeting minutes for December 10th.
I have a motion from Director Garai to approve the meeting minutes from December the 10th, and a second from Director Sloan. Any discussion? That discussion is closed. All those in favor of approving the minutes for the regularly scheduled board meeting on December the 10th, 2025, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. It's the opinion of the president that the ayes have it, and the meeting minutes are. The next item on the agenda is approval for travel in November 2025 for the interim committee meeting in Santa Fe. So this the committee, the Legislative Finance Committee and Water Resources Committees had meetings at which Texas v. New Mexico settlement was going to be discussed, and this included funding. They were not put onto the agenda. OSE and ISD were not put onto the agenda until after our previous meeting. The Government Affairs Committee went to those meetings to support ISC's request for funding for the Texas v. New Mexico settlement. And we attended a dinner for legislators to answer their questions for answer any questions that they had for the settlement. We did not get approval for travel at the meeting prior, so we are seeking approval for travel now. It was 2 board members and 1 staff, 3 board members and 1 staff member that traveled to Santa Fe for one. Josh. Oh, it was 3 board members that attended for 1 night or 2 nights. No. Yes. Nice. So we are seeking board approval for travel retroactively for 3 board members to Santa Fe to attend committees.
I'd like to retroactively approve travel for 3 board members, 1 staff to Santa Fe for 2 nights. Okay.
I have a motion on the floor from Director Colquitt to approve travel for 3 board members to Santa Fe for 2 nights.
For actual costs incurred.
Oh, no. So I need to amend that. Let's
redo this. So Director Colquitt, will you please give us your motion once again?
Yes, I would like to approve travel retroactively for 3 board members for that Santa Fe trip for 2 nights.
Thank you,
Please.
Director Colquitt. I have a motion on the floor to approve travel for 3 board members for 2 nights to Santa Fe. Director, we have a second from Director Ludwig. Any discussion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Donovan.
I appreciate Mr. Garai's mention there about actual expenses. And I also apologize for not having this on the December board meeting agenda. I should have, and I did not. I conferred with Mr. Lutz prior to our travel. And if we are retroactively approving travel, it can only be approved for per diem.
That's my understanding. Just the statute requires advance approval for actual expenses. So my belief under the law is it will have to be just per diem, and anything above that will just have to be borne by the directors.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for clarification. Is there any further discussion? With that discussion is closed, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president and the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Next item on the agenda is approval of First Amendment to Treasurer Manager Contract. Mr. Lutz.
Good morning. As the board knows, we are involved in a performance evaluation of the treasurer manager at this time. As part of that process, I was reviewing our employment agreement with the treasurer manager and found what I believe to be a potential ambiguity in the contract. And to be clear, this is something that I approached Mr. Smith about. He did not approach me about it. But section 3.1 has language regarding his salary that includes a sentence that basically says it is the only monetary compensation he will receive. This is a sentence that is important to have for the Governmental Conduct Act, so that the organization is protected to where if suddenly it arises that he's getting money from other sources, the organization can say, that's not with our approval, and that presents a problem. The concern is section 4 of the contract indicates that this board has the authority as part of the performance evaluation process to award merit bonuses or salary increases. It was my belief that the board wanted to reserve that right to provide that to the treasurer manager, and those two provisions could be seen in conflict. So what I went over with Mr. Smith is a proposed amendment to just amend section 3.1, both to eliminate a typo that is not really that relevant. The district was put twice in the provision, and then indicate that the provision that it was the only monetary compensation he would receive would be subject to section 4D that allowed this board to provide potential merit bonuses or salary increases during the term of the contract. So that is the amendment that we bring for the board's consideration today. Mr. Smith has approved it on his.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Is there any discussion, Mr. Sloan?
I make a motion to approve the amendment to the contract.
I have a motion on the floor to approve the amendment to the contract for Mr. Sloan, seconded by Director Polkwit. Is there any further discussion?
President, quick question. Mr. Lutz, does this require a resolution number?
I don't believe so, because it's a contract and you would just be amending the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Delegate. Is there any further discussion or questions from board members? That discussion is closed. All those in favor of amending the contract with the treasurer manager, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Is the opinion of the president, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Lutz. We move on to committee reports. The first is the Water Resources Committee. Director Garat.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Water Resource Committee met on December 15th. The agenda was to select a committee chair, review the release policy, and go over the Santa Casa Reach Improvement Project. Attending was my Greg Davier, Henry Ludwig, myself, Randy Garai, board members. We had Josh Smith and James Navarre staff, and Dr. King is our consultant. Our meeting started at 10 a.m. The committee chair selected Randy Garai, and I am the new chair for the Water Resource Committee. We discussed the data on the storage at Open Pit Reservoir has been irregular due to instrumental issues. But as of December 9th, Elephant Butte held about 136,000 acre feet, and Cavallo held 15,000 acre feet for a total of about 151,000 acre feet. Attendees discussed the minimum amount of storage and allocation to make an annual release from Cavallo. The minimum historical annual release was in 2013, when the release was about 168,000 acre feet, and the release lasted 47 days. EBID's allocation was about 56,000 acre feet, and the allotment was 3.5 inches. With lessons learned since then, James Norris and Dr. King suggested that if a similar year occurred, they would recommend an allotment of 4 inches and get it out to farmers fast and furious. The 2026 release will likely occur on or about June 1st. Release from upstream water from the Abiquiu Reservoir started November 30th and would continue until December 17th. Dr. King estimated that about 32,000 acre feet would be released. Unfortunately, the storage monitoring issues at Elephant Butte, it is difficult to say how much of that release would reach a reservoir. While no formal recommendation on minimum release was made, it was estimated that about 200,000 acre feet of storage would be necessary to release at the 2013 level due to evaporation and minimum reservoir pools. On the Lower Santa Casa Reach Improvement Project, it is open for comments, which were due January 12th. EBID is listed as a cooperating agency, as is the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. The project is intended to realign the river and improve habitat and deliveries by New Mexico to Elephant Butte Reservoir. The committee referred the preparation of comments to the Legal Review Committee. Tula Resources, New Mexico Copper Company, still has not reached out to Dr. King to discuss the proposed dry stacking handling of the mine tailings and the effect on water use and threat to Cavallo Reservoir. Following up, the Legal Review Committee was going to prepare EBID's response to the Lower Santa Casa Reach Improvement, and Dr. King will continue to monitor the inflow of Elephant Butte Reservoir and communicate with the 2026 season developments, which I believe he will give an update later on this meeting. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Director Colbert.
How long has Dr. King been waiting to hear back from Tula Resources?
Dr. King?
I believe we had that plenary meeting with Tula and the copper company. I'm sorry, I don't have it at the tip of my fingers, but I believe it was in October.
So we haven't had a meeting since, is what you're saying.
And at that meeting, their engineer said that he would reach out, and basically he hasn't.
What is the timeline, or what is the path going forward to get with Tula? I mean,
I think we will get to that in closed session.
that'll work. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Colbert. Thank you, Dr. King.
It
Madam Secretary.
is on the agenda, is it not? I forgot to check.
Close.
I don't know if it's
No, it's
on.
not.
Not sure.
Any further questions for Mr. Garai with regard to the Water Resources Committee report? With that, we'll move on to the Capital Improvement Committee report. Director Garai.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Capital Improvements Committee met via teleconference call because everybody was busy during pecan harvest and such. So we all communicated via telephone on January 6th. The members of the committee are myself, Randy Garai, Rafa Rovirosa, Preston Tharp, Henry Ludwig, all being board members, Joa Franzoy and Josh Smith, staff. For discussion, the committee has completed its review of the asset management plan review prepared by Joa Franzoy. We note that the asset management plan was completed within the assigned time frame by the year end and follows the format and structure requested by the district's treasurer manager. The committee has reviewed the document in detail and is satisfied with both its organization and content. The purpose of the asset management plan is to assess the condition and risk of the district's aging assets, document recent improvements in asset management practices, and establish a framework to guide future capital planning, maintenance, and long-term sustainability. Overall, the committee believes that the plan reflects meaningful progress, supports a transition towards proactive and risk-based asset management, and provides a solid foundation for continued improvement. And I would like to note that Mr. Franzoy did an excellent job in putting this together. It's a very long plan. It's listed in your committee report there. If you have any questions, I would recommend you talk to Joa, because it's very detailed and very lengthy. Thank you for that, Joa.
Yep, no problem. Thank you, Director Garay. Are there any questions for Director Garay?
Mr. President, I just have a comment.
Yes, Director Dunn.
That report is outstanding. That's the kind of report that will bring benefit to this district for years to come. I cannot remember the last time I saw a report so well prepared. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Franzoy, we're going to get to your report later on in the agenda, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Director Garay at this point? Okay, we will move on to Government Affairs Committee report. Director Sloan.
Find it.
I'm not seeing it in this packet either.
I downloaded mine last night. I've got it if you need, Mr. President.
Sure, please.
Who's getting the report? I don't know, I'm sorry.
It's me. Okay. So we've been meeting regularly with our Government Affairs Committee and our lobbyists. And we have this year, for maybe the first time ever, have submitted and prepared request for capital outlay. So I would like to recognize Ms. DeVore for that, for getting us across the finish line there. We are seeking capital outlay for equipment for improvements to the Mesilla Dam, for communication equipment, and for signage to keep members of the community safe when they are near our infrastructure. We have not yet received any capital outlay funding. That will be decided during this session, and we will continue to make requests for capital outlay going forward. The governor has published the budget for the Office of the State Engineer, and so has the Legislative Finance Committee. They proposed 40 million for the general fund, 40.26 million for the general fund, and 92.71 million in total funds. There are differences. It says here that there are no differences between the two plans. There are differences between the two plans. The governor's plan does not have a $22.5 million special. No, the Legislative Finance Committee's plan does not have a $22.5 million special appropriation to purchase water rights and implement depletion reductions tied to the Texas v. New Mexico settlement, while the governor's budget does. We are in favor of the state meeting their commitments, and thus we are in favor of the state appropriating funds to meet their depletion reduction program goals. Mr. Serrano, is there anything that you would like to say about this?
No, just to emphasize your point there that, the governor's request did have a 22.5 million special appropriation. The LFC did not, despite a lot of work on the part of EBID and a lot of others to push for that recommendation to the LFC over the interim period. So we'll have a lot of work to do in the session. So keep that in mind for you all as you think about scheduling. Keep an eye on the committee hearing schedules.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. We believe that $22.5 million is a start, but that there's still a long way to go with regard to funding for meeting obligations in Texas and New Mexico. We approved travel at the last board meeting for, I believe it was up to it was up to 6 trips to Santa Fe during legislative session. We do not need to approve any further travel. There are a few potential travel dates. January 10th is New Mexico Farm and Livestock Bureau reception. Session begins on January the 20th. January 24th through 26th is Mesilla Valley Days, and I will be attending that. January 27th and through February 28th, there are committees that will be meeting regularly. Those are House Agriculture, Acequias, and Water Resources that meet on Tuesday and Thursday at 8:30 in the morning. Appropriations and Finance that meet Monday through Friday at 1:30 p.m. Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources that meet Tuesday and Thursday at 8:30 a.m. And Senate Conservation meets Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. Senate Finance, Monday through Friday at 1:30 p.m. On February the 9th, it is NMSU Day of the Legislature, and February 16th is Soil and Water Districts Day at the Legislature. If I am not mistaken, the end of session is the 20th. Is that correct? Does anybody know that date?
Mr. President, that is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. So we will be traveling up on an as-needed basis when bills that are important to us are being discussed and when funding that is important to the district is discussed. 3 bills of interest that 2 bills that have already been pre-filed, 1 bill has not yet been pre-filed. One is House Bill 37. This bill amends state property tax code to safeguard the agricultural use valuation of land that must remain fallow due to a man-made infrastructure failure within a special water district. This is in particular referring to in the middle Rio Grande below El Vado, which has failed and can no longer hold its full capacity of water. And what they're trying to do here is make sure that ag land that is not currently being farmed due to a lack of supply of water does not get assessed a different tax rate. This is not yet pertinent to our particular district, but we are concerned with making sure that ag land in our district that is fallow for whatever program it's being fallow for does not get assessed a higher rate. So this is something that we should be watching. House Bill 63 authorizes water project fund loans and grants to a set list of cities, counties, and water associations across the state, including several in Doñana County. EBID is not named in the bill and is not eligible to receive funding under this authorization. This is something we're going to look at. May make sense for EBID to try to be part of this bill or future similar bills. The third is a bill that the state engineer was trying to pass last year. This bill has, as of my last knowledge, not been filed yet. Is that still correct, Mr. Serrano?
As far as I know, it's great.
This bill is an amendment to existing law that proposes a significant increase in civil penalties for water law violations, aiming to strengthen enforcement capabilities against illegal diversions.
The bill amends section 72-2-18 and related statutes to raise the maximum daily fine for general violations, including breaches of permit conditions or court orders, from the current $100 limit to $2,000 per day. The primary target for this bill is illegal diversions from people that don't have water rights in the east side of the state that are pumping water for sale to the oil fields. Our concern is always protecting our members, and we are working with OSC to make sure that this bill will protect our members while accomplishing their goals. Ms. DeVore, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. My only comment would be that legislation will still be coming up relating to us, and I will keep everyone in the loop on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeVore. Does anybody have questions for the Government Affairs Committee or Mrs. DeVore? Okay, that will move on. Next item on the agenda is the Water Resources Report. Dr. Keenan.
Good morning. Okay, well, let's jump right into it. It's been a very eventful December and beginning of January here. I had mentioned, I think, to the Water Resources Committee that there were some issues with the stage recording, the water surface elevation reporting at Elephant Butte Reservoir. That appears to be resolved now, and we're basically getting data real time again. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Larry, but I think that's right. This is what our supply looked like on January 12th. So this is Monday. We had 192,000 in Elephant Butte and 15.7 in Caballo for a total of 207,000 acre feet. And we do have some compact credit water, San Juan Chama water. Those don't really enter into the calculation for how much water we can release now, because those both fit within the minimum pool at Elephant Butte Reservoir. So the 10,000, we take out 10,000 acre feet for Elephant Butte, 12,000 acre feet for Caballo, subtract out this water because it would be double counted, and 10,000 acre feet for evaporation. And so we wind up with about 175,000 acre feet of actual releasable water. Now, as Director Garay mentioned, the minimum historical release was in 2013, and that was 168,000. So the good news is this isn't the worst year ever. There's your good news for the day. We're also getting about 1,200 acre feet per day over the last week or so, which surprises me. I didn't expect it to be coming down like this at this point. But as I'll show you, that's due to a very unusual climatic year this year. Looking at our precipitation and snow water equivalent, I did, by the way, I changed the basins that I'm reporting back now. I made these be consistent with the SNOTEL graphs that I'm showing. So these are all coming from the National Water and Climate Center, which is a little bit different from what same agency, same gauges. They're just grouping the basins a little differently. These are Huck 6 basins, as they're called. You've got the headwaters of the Rio Grande, which is basically the Colorado component up here. You've got the upper Rio Grande, which is basically between Ottawee Gauge and the Colorado state line. You've got the Elephant Butte Rio Grande Elephant Butte, which is from Otoe down to Elephant Butte Dam. And then Rio Grande Caballo goes all the way down into Mexico. And you can just about ignore this one. It doesn't contribute very much water at all in terms of snowpack. The water it contributes is monsoon. But this is what the snow water equivalent looks like. You see we're bouncing around 50% of average. And but if you look at precipitation, it's close to average. I don't recall a year when we've had this bad snowpack with this good of precipitation. And this is not unique to us. If you look nationwide, the map on the left is the total precipitation, percent of median. The right map is snow water equivalent, percent of median. And they look like two completely different years, but in fact, these are the exact same 2 years on exact same day. You can see how that the precipitation is doing so much better, but all throughout this, through most of the Southwest, or most of the Western United States, I should say, snowpack is just far behind precipitation. And that's because it's been so warm that much of this precipitation is not showing up as snow, but rather as rainfall. And so that doesn't have to wait until spring to run off. It runs off right now. And that's why we've got 1,200 acre feet per day coming into Elephant Butte Reservoir. That's good to have it early. The downside is there will be no spring runoff this year. The spring runoff is now. Looking at a couple of the snow trajectories, I picked one rather than doing the basin average. I picked a couple of individual sort of representative gauges so you can see how things are going. Wolf Creek Summit, of course, is in the headwaters. That's up in Colorado. And you see that we had a long flatline period from late November, really through December, or I don't know, this is still kind of a flat line. You want to see big steps coming in as large storms come through, and that just hasn't happened since November. Same thing's happening down in the upper Rio Grande. Interestingly, the storms that did come through recently hit the upper Rio Grande harder than they hit the headwaters. So they put more snow on the ground, or at least relatively more snow on the ground. Notice the different scales here too. There's just a lot more water up there in the headwaters, but it's a disappointing snow year. I did also put the statistics on this one. What you see is the shading is the 80th percentile up here, the 60th percentile here, the 40th percentile here, 20th percentile here, and all-time minimum is this red line down here. And the all-time minimum is on each day of the year, the lowest it's ever been in this period of record, which I believe goes back to 1991. And the worst ever peak here, that is pretty well defined at Wolf Creek Summit by the year 2002, which was what sort of drove us into our current drought conditions. And the minimum here at Hopewell occurred just recently in 2018. So we still may see if the forecast is not real good, but we're definitely not going to make median snowpack this year. Now this one, I apologize. This is what happens when an engineer starts playing with data. What this is a few river stations along the Rio Grande. You've got Otoe, Albuquerque, and then San Marcial floodway are the solid lines. And you see Otoe up here at the top. You see the Albuquerque gauge here in the light blue, and then San Marcial floodway is in solid red. One thing that we talked about with I think we did mention in the last board meeting, and we also talked about it a little bit with the Water Resource Committee, is this planned release of water that they had from the very end of November into December. And I think it started on November 29th and continued to December 17th. And this dashed purple line at the bottom here is the Rio Chama below Abiquiu Reservoir. So this is that release. And you see there was a base flow and the spike when they started the major release, and then it came back down to their base flow. And so you can see what happened with that. One of the other questions we had was how much of that water was going to make it to Elephant Butte. And that's kind of a more complicated question than you would think, because there is base flow coming out of Abiquiu before and after, and there is base flow at each of the other stations before and after. So what I did is I took the hydrograph here at Abiquiu, subtracted off the base flow component, and so think of it as the increase in release for this this release of water. They released a total of about 32,000 acre feet, as I think I mentioned before, and 29 of that, or 29,000 of that or so, is the spike. Well, I went downstream, and 95% of that spike made it past Otoe. And of course, it comes racing down Rio Chama, hits the Rio Grande, and it's right there at Otoe gauge. So there's maybe a day lag time between the release at Abiquiu and the arrival at the Otoe gauge, and you can see every little lump and bump on it. It's like you just move the hydrograph downstream. And so 95% of it's there. I didn't do the calculation for Albuquerque. That's just take a look at the middle Rio Grande. But I did go and pull the net inflow at Elephant Butte, which is the change in storage plus any release. There is no release now, so it's just change in storage, daily change in storage. We're dealing in units of CFS here because that's what the USGS gauges are. But as near as a rough approximation, I didn't do any fancy, detailed hydrologic analysis. I just basically took the spike component and added them up because the base flows were there before and after. So the spike flow, about 65% of it reached Elephant Butte Reservoir. And that's, again, you could probably refine that a little bit, but it's not going to change by much. Figured 2/3 or so made it to Elephant Butte. And that's Elephant Butte Reservoir. The solid red line you see here, the solid red line is the flow at San Marcial floodway, which is close to, but not exactly the same as Elephant Butte Reservoir, because of course you've got all the reservoir effects and things like that. Now, let me stop there and ask if there are any questions on that. Okay, I've either answered the issues adequately or you're completely confused. Looking at the February, March, April, so the sort of the rest of our the next 3 months, you can say business as usual, below average precipitation and above average temperature. This is why I say that it's highly, highly unlikely that we'll get anywhere close to median snowpack. There just isn't a sign that anything big is coming, and we're running out of time, quite frankly. Looking at the shorter term forecast, this is looking at the end of, basically the end of January. So, in this case, above average chance of precipitation, so let's hope that we get something more, but definitely warmer than average temperatures will continue. So I think if we get if we get moisture into the into the upper watershed now. We probably will get some snowpack. It's just not going to be all that much. The drought monitor, because our precipitation has been pretty good, we are not in terrible shape. We're not all exceptional drought as we have been at times, but we are still, throughout the watershed in some level from, or throughout the state, some level from abnormally dry to extreme drought, just a few little patches of extreme drought. So basically abnormally dry to severe drought. And that hasn't changed much since last month. It's remained remarkably consistent. In terms of the seasonal drought outlook, we're not expecting much relief. Yes.
I would like to note that California doesn't have any color in it at all.
Yes, this is your good point. And this is a very unusual condition, but they've been getting those atmospheric rivers. And it's interesting, that was all rainfall except for one place, and that is Owens Valley, which has all kinds of snowpack around it. It's interesting, but yeah, you haven't seen California look that clear for a long time, and don't expect to see. Well, I guess these atmospheric rivers seem to be getting more common. That certainly is unusual. The major change as far as we're concerned is that the headwaters up here has gone from no drought to drought development likely. So to keep it simple, it's a pretty pessimistic look at the remainder of the snow season, which means that they haven't issued a January forecast yet. That usually doesn't come out until the end of the month, where they do a forecast based on January 1st conditions. But based on the fact that the snowpack we've got now, and the fact that what precipitation we've had is working its way down already, I'm expecting an unusually dismal spring runoff forecast, which is the forecasted river flows from March 1st through July 31st. La Nina is still present. They expect a high probability that we'll go into neutral conditions between now and March. And you can see over here, but you can't see a lot of sign of it. It looks like things are all pretty cool. As you come down here to the present, things are still pretty cool in the Eastern Pacific at the equator, but they're expecting that to begin to warm up, and we'll go into neutral conditions by the end of March. So bottom line, nothing has changed much. Well, something has changed much. In the past, I was saying that 2026 will likely be a critically short supply year. Now I'm saying it'll be a critically short year. The good news is that we've gotten up past the 0 points on D1 and D2. Remember that D1 says zero delivery, zero diversion up to 67,000 acre feet of release. And D1 is zero for delivery and allocation to Mexico up to about 123,000 acre feet. You saw that we're at 170,000 acre feet. So I did, just to give you sort of a general idea, I didn't put this in the presentation, but I did see what it would look like. If we were to do an allocation today, I would estimate that Mexico would have an allocation of about 4,800 acre feet. In 2013, they were at, my recollection is about 37,000. So they'd be at about 3,600. They would be at 4,800. EBID would be at 58,000, most of which is carryover, and EP1 would be at about 44,000, most of which is also carryover. But that's all hypothetical. That's just, rough numbers, and there's a lot that goes into it. We will be applying a drought adjustment factor, consecutive years drought adjustment factor of 0.88. It doesn't affect the allocation right now because we're so low on the allocation that we're not even allocating based on D2. I used a diversion ratio of 61%, and that's actually higher than the D2 diversion ratio would be at this point. So we would be 57-43 between the two districts. And with that, I will take any questions.
Questions for Dr. King?
Mr. President,
Mr. Davi?
Dr. King, we seem to be having a sustained base flow of about 1,000 CFS. Excuse me. Seem to have a sustained base flow of about 1,000 acre feet into Elephant Butte since October.
Mhm.
Is the expectation that base flow will continue for the next 60 days?
I'm not sure. This is so unusual. I don't know how long it will continue. The flow at the upper gauges has been pretty unsteady. So what I'm afraid is going to happen is, you'll see it drop like a rock up at Lobatos, and that drop will then follow its way down to Elephant Butte. But this is so unusual. I don't exactly know when to expect that.
Thank you, Dr. King. Thank you, Mr. President.
And Mr. Davi. So, Dr. King, what does it take for atmospheric rivers to push past California and hit the Rockies where we're looking for them to land?
It wouldn't be legislation. I don't know that we've seen anything. I don't think, like in our big years like 2019, that's not the result of an atmospheric river pushing over. I don't recall a case, and I may be spacing on something, but I don't recall a case where an atmospheric river has come this far east.
So what's the difference? What's the difference between an atmospheric river and a storm that drops snow on the southern Rockies?
Well, basically the atmospheric rivers are they're kind of an anomaly of air, pushing very much south to north, and they come inland. Whereas the big storms that hit the Rockies are primarily monsoon. Well, not monsoon, but the winter storms blowing in off the Pacific. Locally, we get the winter storms blowing in off the Pacific, not all that much moisture in them down south, but we also then do get a substantial monsoon. Once in a while, we get hurricane remnants, but that's generally not in snow season. So our sort of bread and butter is those routine winter storms that just, when they get cycling, blowing in off the Pacific, they just about line up out there in the Pacific and come in, and you'll see the snow charts just stair step up during the year. Unfortunately, that circulation hasn't been working very well, so we get a lot of flat lines. I wouldn't venture to go into the details of an atmospheric river because I'm an engineer, not a climatologist or meteorologist, that would be.
Thank you, Dr. King. Are there any further questions for Dr. King? Thank you for your report, Dr. King.
Thank you.
Mr. Narvaez, do you have anything for us today?
Good morning, everybody. No, I sure don't. Nothing to contribute to Dr. King's report.
Thank you, Mr. Narvaez.
Thank you.
Next up, we have general and administrative. First on the list is a financial report from Mr. Franzo. Franzo, you have the floor.
You still have to share them, Jim.
Okay. Real quick.
Alright. Okay, first off, I wanted to note that right here, we should have 2026. We'll go ahead and make that change for our records. Our cash balance is moving up. This is about a $4 million positive difference. Most of that is just due to assessments that are being collected. Usually our cash balance builds up as we collect assessments at the start of the year, and we end up spending that on salaries and wages and operations of the district as the year continues. So usually towards the beginning of the year, you see a big cash balance, and then we spend that periodically throughout the year. Been having a lot of cash kind of in our books, mostly due to salaries and wages and some just kind of spend on grants. I believe we did end up getting our payment in for our City of Las Cruces pipeline as well. I can discuss that here in a second, but interest is looking good. I'm gonna double check and verify these numbers. But you know, if those numbers are accurate, it's very healthy for the district. We're making return on our money that we're leaving in our investment account. And if we can consistently do that and not draw down on that account, you know, interest should subsidize the district to whatever extent for our future plans. It was kind of given to me or tasked by me from the finance committee chair to really keep an eye out for our assessments and kind of what our attrition rate is going to be on that going forward. So we're going to potentially be transitioning to some new software that's going to be able to help me out with that. We're looking to implement that May 1st. And so we'll keep an eye on that. So far, it's looking pretty good. It's hard to tell until we get everything in and until we kind of hit the end of February. Usually that's when we receive most of our assessments that are going to come in the year. So we'll keep an eye on that. We spent about $1 million for the grant purchases related to our ISC funding agreement. Our capital appropriations to date is about 5.5 million out of around 8 million that we're spending on heavy equipment. So we've made a lot of progress there. I'm sure you guys driving by have seen a lot of that equipment in the yard. It's massive, it's huge. So thanks to Ryan and his team for taking care of that. We do have kind of a PR newsletter going out, and it'll kind of explain that and what that's for. Also, if you guys want to look at the asset management plan we'll get into next, that talks about kind of that funding and what's the purpose of that and what we're going to do with that. Auction proceeds, we see about 23,000. I think in total we're about 180,000. Is that right, Leah? And we're going to be looking to put some of that money back into the maintenance department. And then we got our money that I talked about for the City of Las Cruces. They're paying us to put the pipe in there on the Las Cruces lateral. And then the grant proceeds is for the ISC grant. EBID expends the money and then we get reimbursed. So it's not technically that we're getting the money, we're just getting reimbursed for that. So it is a revenue in a sense. And then our interest rate is 3.78. Interest rates are going down. I keep up with the Federal Reserve a lot, and it's looking like, you know, we're probably going to continue to see interest rates decrease over the course of the year. And so I'll be keeping a close eye on that. And I'll be looking to eventually this year find some free time to kind of develop a 10-year plan, taking into account interest rates, taking into account, you know, direction from the board, direction from Josh as to where we're going to spend money and where we're going to make improvements to the district. Right now, I think it's getting us to a base level of here's where we are operating. And then once that's done, okay, where do we invest in our, you know, critical assets of the district going forward? So I think we're pretty much caught up there. I'll open it up if you guys have any questions on this.
Any questions for Mr. Franzler? Things are looking good, Mr. Franzler. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to leave this screen share up. I don't think I'm going to screen share the asset management plan because it's about 50 pages. I was just short of that 50-page mark. was really pushing for that, but formatting kind of ruined that for me. So I just want to open it up. If you guys have any questions on that, I'm going to be brief. It is a lengthy read, but what that does is it looks at the condition of our assets for the district, and it's not complete. We're still going to gather a bunch of data. I put in a funding requisition through the state for one of their planning grants. I might try to bring in some engineering experts who can kind of assess some of the more difficult structures of the district and give us kind of condition assessments on that. But kind of the plan is, here's the current state of our assets, here's what's critical, here's what's needed from an investment perspective. And then how do we go from being reactive to proactive? I talk about how we're going to start tracking our assets, kind of what's I hint at what kind of is our 10-year outlook for automation and stuff of the district. So I very much encourage you guys to read that. I think it's very powerful to where Josh and I are in alignment of what's our plan going forward. Obviously that'll be ran through you guys, and you guys will be ultimately making a lot of those decisions, but I think it's very important to read. And so kind of the ask is for the board is, can I post that to the EBID website? I think it's important from my perspective that constituents see what we have planned. I think it kind of alludes to the fact of here's where your assessment dollars are going, and here's where we're going to try to make a lot of effort. We've taken strides in terms of, updating our equipment, updating our fleet, getting kind of the needs of our operations up to date over the past 2 years since I've been here. We're still going to continue to finish and polish that off. But once that's done, we're going to start looking at investing into infrastructure projects and clean up the district, getting all the drains operational, getting all the main canal structures, checks, turnouts, everything kind of repaired and out of critical condition, leveraging the finances of the district in terms of assessment dollars coming in, plus any federal or state funding that we can get for that. So I encourage you guys to read it. My ask is to approve the asset management plan for the district is one, and secondly, the publishing of that externally outside the district.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. This report is phenomenal. And the organization and the presentation of the data makes it very easy to understand and really shows us the state of our infrastructure. So thank you very much for putting all the time and effort into producing something so detailed and professional. Do we need to have a board action to approve this?
The posting of to the website?
Yeah, the posting to the website and the approval of the plan,
Adoption.
the adoption of the plan.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davier.
yeah, that was gonna be my question as well about what specifically we're being asked to approve. Like just in the idea of, do I think that there's anything in this that doesn't work posting to the district? I don't think district management needs my approval to put a report on their webpage. I think there'll be very few people that read it.
For sure.
But lots of people should. If
Right.
you're trying to understand what it is that we're up against with the district. For approval of the board, what action or policy would staff be pursuing that uses this plan as that direction?
Josh was the one who tasked this to me, and I believe the approval of it and its adoption is to request money through the state. This plan will be used in a lot of asks for funding. They want to have an asset management plan in place, and so one that the board agrees to and not just me acting in my own direction is probably better because you guys provide the direction of the district. So just kind of more or less your guys' blessing that we can utilize that in whatever funding agreements or asks that we have for that going forward.
Thank you.
And David, I don't know if you
Like, I yield.
Okay, Mr. Lutz. Mr. President, you know, Joa, is it fair to, I guess I say Mr. Franzo, I don't think it's too informal. Is it potentially fair to analogize this to like the infrastructure capital improvement plan? Well,
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
formalized that you sent to the legislature appears to have similar characteristics that you would use with respect to governmental agencies. That is something that I believe this board passes.
Correct.
And I would echo Vice President Dauvier's comment. I don't think you need board permission to post on the website.
Okay.
I think that's just something management decides to do.
And then for adoption, we're good there too.
I think if it's similar to the ICIP, I think that's something the board does pass, is that. Right, so I was suggesting that approval by the board of the plan, if it was going to be used for governmental agencies, would be the thing to do.
Do we need to approve this via resolution?
I don't think so.
Mr. President, I would like to, I think that we should approve this via resolution. I think that we should approve all major policy via resolutions. That we can keep track of our policies easily.
Because I think ICIP is a resolution, is it not?
Yes, that we have to approve more formally.
Mr. President,
Mr. Dodd.
I concur with the assessment. I do believe we approved the ICIP with a resolution and a resolution number. I also agree that I believe the approval of this would be through resolution. And that the resolution would reference this report. I do have a question on the report when it's appropriate time, Mr. President. Thank you.
Sure. So, then I suggest that we prepare resolutions for the next board meeting. I am also in favor of posting this on the website, and unless anybody has any opposition, I think you're good to go with that.
Okay.
Questions on the report?
Mr. President. I cannot emphasize how outstanding this report is. And I've not had it long enough to like really get in it and start feeling the nitty gritty bits of it. It is so good. I appreciate how you've separated out the various, I guess, forms of assets we have. During my tenure, the only one we've even gotten close to is the rolling stock. And it is not the major asset of the district. It's the one people see and think of being an asset. But it's the canals, the structures in those canals, the drains, the structures in those drains. Those are the real assets. You have replacement costs for a lot of things. I was struggling to find what was being assigned as a replacement cost for the irrigation infrastructures, the canals, the drains, essentially everything from diversion point to back to the river.
So in the first category of that, and I can pull it up, but kind of in the very first summary, it should talk about the method that I used. I believe it was 60,000 for main canal check structures.
I saw that.
And I forget what the other number was. It might be
6,000 for turnouts.
Correct. And so my evaluation of how that's determined for the replacement cost is all kind of documented there, and the approach that I used to do that.
So I'm having trouble finding it. I felt like the replacement cost was in the single digit millions, which seems like off by at least an order of magnitude for the entire irrigation.
So what that replacement cost is, Mr. Davier, is only the critical assets that we would replace within 2 years, in 5 years.
Thank you.
So the total replacement cost is much higher, but there's no need to calculate that. What it's basically doing is it's calculating, here's our replacement cost, and it's a weighted average calculation saying, okay, pretty much 4 million of maybe the 6 million needs to be replaced right now. That's critical infrastructure. And then it's kind of looking at the depreciable life of the remaining assets and saying, here's kind of what it would cost for us to make them 100% new right now. But that total replacement will come later. as the useful life of those assets depreciates. And so we would be looking at a big magnitude difference that you're describing. And that's only for main canal infrastructure. That does not include lateral infrastructure, and that does not include specialized infrastructure where we need to go in and do some different condition assessments such as siphons and things of that nature. So it's just check structures and turnouts for now. So there is a lot on the table, and we're working to document and finish up, kind of looking at the condition from our perspective of those assets. Our team wasn't able to wrap up in time for all the laterals, but they're getting close. We should have that in the next iteration of this plan.
Thank you, Mr. Franzoy. And Mr. President, what I'm getting at here to try to help me understand, ultimately, when we're getting to the point of voting on assessments. We have canals, and there really isn't a replacement cost for a canal, because the canal doesn't just go away. There's a maintenance cost, and its maintenance cost is essentially the replacement cost, and we do that to some extent annually. But pipelines, when we change it from an earthen lined canal to a buried pipe, the annual maintenance goes way down, but that buried pipe has a life. It will need to be replaced at some point in the future. And so if I were to envision the entire infrastructure of the district as being something that will need to be replaced at some point in the future, I need to understand its depreciable life, and I need to understand the total replacement value of everything in the district. And that helps me to understand how much we need to be spending annually. It's a big number. My expectation, if we got grant funding to simply throw all that stuff into our system now, and then our job was to simply maintain it and replace it over the years, our maintenance costs would go down. I don't know by how much, but our replacement, the annual amount of replacement, I don't know what that number would be, but my guess is somewhere between $20 and $100 an acre for our members, and what it would cost us to keep that stuff going into the future. That's a wide margin, 5x in what we need to be asking our members. And so ultimately, Mr. Franzoy, that's the reason I'm asking what the entire replacement cost is for the entire district, and trying to understand when we replace maintenance with an asset that will wear out.
Right.
What is it we actually need to keep in the assessment process to get there? Thank you, Mr. President.
And can I respond to that? So this is kind of first step, looking at here's the condition of where we're at. I think my next step will be generating a forecast and saying, here's what we're looking at over the course of 10 years. That'll be provided to me by the direction of Josh and this board. And what is that going to do to our assessments? What are our goals? What do we want to achieve? And I think the information you're looking for will come out of that second step. This is just kind of the foundation of here's where we're at. Okay, now how do we get to where we want to go, and what's that going to look like? So that'll be coming later, and I'll be putting that together.
Mr. Franzo, I recall that we have applied for grants for master planning.
Correct.
I'm sure that will further develop this idea of asset management and replacement and maintenance into the long term.
Yeah, and there's a lot of variables. What level of automation you achieve. There's a lot of things to think about there. So
Great, this is phenomenal. This is exactly what we were asking for 2 years ago. Thank you for the work that you put into this, and I think that we are headed in the right direction. Are there any further questions? Mr. Franzo, Mr. Luke, can you two please work together to write up a resolution for this asset management plan?
Interesting.
Mr. Ryan.
Can you wait a month for the resolution, or do we need to speed it up?
no, that's fine. Yeah. I have permission now to distribute it externally. And so the resolution is just to kind of formally place it at the district. So should be good.
Very good. Thank you. Director Wright. With that, we will move on to the DFA annual report, Mr. President.
So, as you guys may know, we underwent a ton of change in our finance department here at the district. Our DFA annual report submission deadline is at the end of this month. Typically, we kind of have, okay, where did we end the year at? Here's our Q4, and then any level of budget adjustments that need to be given before that. I have not received that information. We have our external financial team helping to get me that information. I don't know when they're gonna have that. We could potentially call a special board meeting to maybe meet our deadline for submitting to DFA. To my knowledge, there's really no penalty for the district for a late submission of those documents. And so whenever I get the information and have those ready and submitted, we will go over those resolutions and the board will act and approve those. But I just wanted to have this on the agenda to let you guys know that, you know, we might have a late submission for those. And we'll just kind of see what that looks like.
Can you please repeat why we're gonna have a late submission?
Because the end of the year financials need a lot of reconciling and they're not yet closed with our external team. And I need that information to make the appropriate adjustments for our DFA reporting to submit to the state.
Is this a result of changing our auditor?
No, this is a result of our finance director retiring and catching our external accounting firm up to speed and making sure we're closing everything right, making sure everything is clean and reported appropriately going forward.
Starting, DFA annual report. Okay, then we will move on to approval of professional services contract for general legal, with Martin Luther. You should share. Ms. Diaz.
Okay, this is gonna be a contract renewal, the yearly renewal for David Lutz. And it's year 2 of 4, and there's no changes to the rates and no other changes to the term.
Mr. Sloan.
I move to approve the contract for Martin and Lutz. Second.
I have a motion to approve the contract for Martin Lutz from Director Sloan, seconded by Director Colquitt.
Mr. President.
Discussion, Mr. Davia.
Thank you very much, Ms. Diaz. So this is the first renewal, if I understand correctly, on this
The
contract.
second.
This is the second.
No, I'm sorry, it is the first renewal, so it's year 2.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And you were saying that the maximum length of the contract is 4 years.
Yes.
The term says that this will be may renew for up to. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm struggling on the term because it doesn't have an expiration date. The term of the renewal we're about to sign says that this is may renew for an annual basis for up to 3 additional 1-year terms. Which seems to suggest it's 5.
Maybe you have the wrong copy.
It's possible.
I'm looking at the-
What's the copy that you have said?
The copy that is submitted on the agenda is the contract may be renewed for an annual basis up to, oh, I see my mistake. It says 3, but I should have changed that to 2. So I will reprint that.
Mr.
and get that
President,
corrected.
I would make an amendment to amend the term to say 2 additional 1-year terms.
Is that's a motion, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to amend the contract. Correct. The number of additional terms to 2, where it says 3. Second, That motion was from, Director Dogby. I have a second from Director Colquitt. Any discussion on the amendment? With that discussion is closed, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. It's the opinion of the president that the ayes have it, and the contract is amended. We are back to our initial motion to approve the contract. Any further discussion on this motion? With that discussion is closed, all those in favor of approval of the amended contract, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it, and the contract for professional services with Martin Boots is approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. W.
Next item on the agenda is our HR and safety update. Pascal.
Good afternoon, board. Or actually, I guess it's still morning. Sorry about that. On the HR report, it does show that we have 81 current employees. We do have a new employee starting on the 26th. He is replacing our diesel heavy equipment mechanic that got moved to the ISC. In addition to that, we still have one posting out there for a ditch rider up north. We are taking our time looking at that, making sure it's something we need. We have some recognitions, but nothing in regards to like our 5, 10, 15 years. But Leo Barrett has been here 38 years, or will be as of January 25th. And we have a lot of new employees that hit their 2-year mark this month. In regards to upcoming events, just as a note, I put down that the last day for constituent tax payments before interest starts accruing is January 31st. And our office will be closed February 16th, which is a Monday after the next board meeting for President's Day. And at this time, I put down that there were no upcoming retirements, but I have been informed that 2 of our equipment operators down south will be retiring at the end of February. I don't have concrete something in writing, but I have been told they are planning to retire February 26th. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Maciel. And thank you to Mr. Leo Barrett. 38 years is a very long tenure and a lot of time dedicated to serving our members. So thank you for Next item on the agenda is the manager's update. We have no manager and no assistant manager. Is Joe out in the hall?
Yeah, let me grab him real quick.
Sorry, I'm back. Next item on the agenda is the manager's update, Mr. Frankel. Okay.
So not too much on the manager's update. We are moving through it. You know, what feels like the speed of light for government in terms of all of our grants getting done. We're almost wrapped up with the city of Las Cruces. And we just started on Monday for our drain cleaning project with ISC. We will start here in the near future for the rehabilitation of the PL 566 dams. We have a meeting tomorrow to discuss kind of what that initial kind of construction and maintenance looks like. And yeah, we're just rocking and rolling. Things are really moving. The district, I believe, is on a healthy trajectory for consistent improvement. We're implementing a lot of software and technology, and things are looking good. So hopefully we get some water, and if not, we're going to continue on with construction and improvement of the district.
Thank you, Mr. Frankel. Any questions from the board for Mr. Frankel? next item on the agenda is the calendar of events. Brenda.
So. All travel here has been approved aside from one. Is it appropriate for me to add an item here that just came up this morning?
I believe we cannot do that. Is that right, Mr. Lutz?
I would agree. I
Okay.
don't think we can.
Okay, so I'll have that for the next board meeting. So we have our legislative session coming up. That'll be January 20th through February 19th. Travel's been approved, I believe. The legislative or government committee is working on days that they will attend. And then the irrigation leaders workshop is next week. Travel has been approved. And then we'll just kind of coordinate how we're gonna get there. And that is very informative. I think that's gonna be a very good conference. I've been going to this for about, I guess, a couple of times now, maybe 4 times. Each time it just gets better and better. It's gradually improving. I'm meeting more people, new people each time with solutions, with things that we can do to help out our district. And I think it's just kind of a very healthy event to go to and shake some hands. And, you know, we're not the only ones innovating and trying to improve our water supply and conditions. So it's kind of west-wide. And then our next board meeting will be February 11th and should be good.
Thank you, Mr. Franzoy. So the conference is getting better and better, and Mr. Franzoy is presenting on more and more topics at those conferences. I
Yeah.
wonder if there's a correlation there. Thank you for putting those presentations together, Mr. Franzoy, for representing our district at the conferences. The next item on the agenda is engineering and maintenance. Mr. Rubio.
Good morning.
Morning.
For engineering and maintenance, we have multiple projects that are currently underway. We have the Las Cruces lateral, over by the, convention center. We have the Laguna lateral, the heading that we're, rehabbing. Up north on the Nordstrom, we have the overshot project. That's just to channelize water, prevent overflow. Get that into our main. Within the department, we have drone flights for the drains and dams. That's in association to the ISC funding work that we're gonna be doing that we just kicked off on the drains. Training is continuing for the survey equipment that we received, just so we get maximum use out of the equipment that we've obtained. We're preparing for the plasma cutter that is set to arrive next month, so we're gonna start looking into some training and getting some practice projects going, get it prepared for when the cutter gets here. And we're currently redesigning 2 radial gates for the 3 Saints down south. So basically remove those, we're kind of re-engineering them, making them better, beefing them up a little bit and just making sure they're ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Rubio. Any questions from the board for Mr. Rubio? Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We will need to pull the permit for Colquitt Farms from the consent agenda. Are there any other permits that the board would like to pull from this consent agenda?
So do I not recuse myself or what's
You have to state that you, what's the term, Mr. Lutz?
Yeah, you would recuse yourself from, you know, because it's being pulled from the consent agenda, it's going to be considered on its own.
okay,
At that time, you essentially
okay,
accuse yourself or abstain.
okay.
So when it comes to voting, we state how many, or we state that there is an abstention, is that correct? Okay. Very good, then, let's do the permit that is pulled from the consent agenda first.
Mr. President, I move for approval of permit 2026-L-001 to Culprit Con Farms.
I have a motion on the floor for
Second motion.
the permit by Director Davier and a second from Director Garai. Any discussion?
Mr. President, I'll note that it's a standard culvert crossing.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. With that, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? Mr. Oakwood, any abstentions?
None. Yes, I abstain. Sorry.
We have abstention and 4, 5, 6 in favor with zero no's. Moving on to the consent agenda.
Mr. President, I approve, make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion on the floor to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
A second. A motion to approve by Director Sloan, second by Director Colquitt. Discussion. With that discussion is closed, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it and the motion carries. That brings us to the end of open session for our meeting. What, Mr. Dahlia, what is it that we usually do between now and closed session? Is there anything else?
Mr. President, you might ask if there are any, further open session announcements.
Are there any further open session announcements?
I have a question. Can I take a picture of the board members?
Yes,
It's for the law.
sure. Mr. Lutz.
Mr. President, can I make one comment? The
Yes.
agenda is a little different this time. There will actually be an additional open session potential item after closed session. To the extent the board considers any kind of salary increase or merit bonus for the treasurer manager based on the closed session discussion of the performance evaluation. So it would be closed session going back into open session for one potential item. Just a clarification.
Are there any further considerations that we have to?
I don't believe so. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. If anyone had a burning desire to return for the final open session item. That potential.
Are there any further comments for this open session? Okay, Ms. Ellis, you can take a photo.
I need y'all to stand up, like,
Sure.
it's like a group picture.
Where would you like to stand? In front of the?
So I think that
Okay, Mr. President, point of order.
We could do that at recess.
Oh, sure. Let's do that. Okay. I need a motion to,
Mr. President, I move to go into closed session to discuss the agenda closed session items.
I have a motion on the floor to go into closed session and by Director Dalge and a second by Director Colquitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no.
To me, but just.
Sure.
And it is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it and we are in closed session.
Sorry, I don't see that.
I will note for the record that everything discussed.
We have to come out of closed session first, Mr. President.
I'll make a motion to come out of closed session.
I have a motion to come out of closed session by Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Christ. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it. We are back in open session. I will note for the record that everything discussed in closed session fell under a topic published on the closed session agenda items. Is that all I need to say from Mr. Dalge?
I believe that's sufficient.
Very good. One more. We have one more open session.
Did you start recording?
Yeah, yes, we did.
Oh.
We have one more open session agenda item. Potential approval of merit bonus / salary increase for treasurer manager.
Mr. President.
Mr. Dalge.
Mr. President, this board has conducted a review of the performance for our treasurer manager, Mr. Josh Smith. The review is favorable. Mr. Smith has taken extraordinary strides to actively improve his skill set in order to manage this district over his first year. He has also had extraordinary amounts of travel and extended hour
work that he has done for this district over the past year. Therefore, I make a motion to increase his salary based on the merit of his performance to $240,000 per year.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Director Dave to increase the salary of the district manager, treasurer manager to $240,000 per year, seconded by Director Colquitt. I will add that I believe the value that is being generated for the district by our manager is far greater than what it was at this point last year. And I believe that a merit increase in salary is appropriate. Go ahead. Any other discussion?
Does Marilyn need to be admitted to this open session? Because she's still in the waiting room. She doesn't need to jot that down. Okay.
Mr. President, I don't believe so. Our proceedings are being recorded.
I agree.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? With that discussion is closed, all of those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it and the motion carries. Does anybody else have any, is it further comments?
Any further open session business?
Any further open session business? Then I will accept a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn by Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Garai. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. It is the opinion of the president that the ayes have it and the meeting is adjourned.